Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 69b, starting from the very last line of 69a with the new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, or the bottom, very last line of 69a. The Mishnah says, Malak v'nim tistreifa remero men eina metame beis avliya. If the priest pinched the nape of the bird's neck properly, and then it was found to be a treifa, and it was therefore disqualified from being sacrificed and forbidden for consumption by a priest, Rabbi Meir says an olive bulk of its meat does not render one who swallows it ritually impure when it is in the throat, as the pinching prevents it from assuming the status of a carcass. And now we turn to 69b, top of the page. Words Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says its status is like any other carcass of an unslaughtered kosher bird, and its meat does render one who swallows it impure. It does render one who swallowed it ritually impure. Amar Rabbi Meir, Kal v'chomer, im nivlas behema shemitam b'magav masa shchita sameteres reva sametuasa nivlas ha'oif she'ena metame magav masa eladin shetieh shechata interes toreva sametuasa. Rabbi Meir said, my opinion can be inferred by a Kal v'chomer. If an animal carcass transmits impurity to a person through touching it and through carrying it, and nevertheless the slaughter of an animal purifies it, even if it is a treifa, from its impurity, meaning its slaughter prevents it from assuming the impurity status of the carcass, then with regard to a bird carcass, which possesses a lesser degree of impurity, as it does not transmit impurity to a person through touching it and through carrying it, but only through swallowing it, is it not logical that its slaughter should purify it, even if it is a treifa from its impurity? Mamatzinu b'shritasoi shehu machshar ta'achila ומתארס טרייפה סוי, מתומה סוי, אף מליקה סוי, שהוא מכשיר ויחיל את ההל תפרסם מיני תומה סוי. And once it is established that slaughter renders a bird that is a treifa pure, it can be inferred that just as we found with regard to its slaughter that it renders a bird fit for consumption and purifies a bird, even if it is a treifa, from its impurity, so too its pinching, which renders a bird offering fit with regard to consumption, should purify it, even if it is a treifa from its impurity. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Daya kinivlas behema shchitasa mitalta velo mikilata. Rabbi Yossi says, although one can derive from the case of an animal that slaughtered renders even a bird that is treifa pure, that derivation cannot be extended to pinching. The same restriction that applies to every a fortiori inference, namely that a halacha derived by means of an a fortiori inference is no more stringent than the source from which it is derived, applies here. It is sufficient for the halachic status of the carcass of a bird that is treifa to be like that of the carcass of an animal that is a treifa. Its slaughter renders it pure, but its pinching does not. And now we start at the Gemara, the Talmud. Okay. Rabbi Meir lo darish dayo v'hadayo deraisahu. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi answers Rabbi Meir by invoking the principle that a halacha derived by means of an a fortiori inference, meaning a Kal v'chomer, is no more stringent than the source from which it is derived. Dayo lavo min hadin lihiyot kenidon. Dayo lavo min hadin lihiyot kenidon. The way I like to see that is like, okay, let's just say, okay, there's Mike and Bob, okay? If Bob is not strong and he can pick up 100 pounds, then Mike, who is strong, can for sure pick up 100 pounds. But you cannot say that Bob, who is not strong, can pick up 100 pounds. So Mike, who is very strong, can for sure pick up 105 pounds. You can't go more than the place where you're taking it from. That's the principle of Dio, how I understand it. So you can't learn out anything more than the actual thing itself. And how does it apply to here? I'm not sure, but let's continue. Right. That means is no more stringent than the source from which it's derived. The Gemara asks, does Rabbi Meir not require an affortiori inference to conform the principle that it's dio? It's enough for the conclusion that emerges from a Kal V'chomer inference to be like its source. But isn't the principle it's sufficient mandated by Torah law? Oh, through this Kal V'chomer, Rabbi Meir is learning a new halacha, something that hasn't been taught before. Maybe that's what the dio is. Maybe that's how he's violating dio. And they say, how can Rabbi Meir not hold of it if it's a Torah concept? The Tanya, midin Kal V'chomer ketzad, v'yom Hashem el Moshe, v'avia yarok yirak b'faneha. Kal V'chomer l'shechina 14 yom. Okay, okay. So if someone who is like a daughter, and it would be like her father spit in her face, was put away for 7 days, so Kal V'chomer and the Shechina, which is much more than that, should be for 14 days, but you can't say that because it's Dayo. Dayo lavo min adin lihiyot kanidon. Dayo לבוא מן הדין להיות כנידון. Okay. As is Tana Braita, how is it derived from the Torah? That derivation by means of an affortiori inference is a valid method of biblical exegesis. The Torah states with regard to Miriam, who is reprimanded by God, and the Lord said to her, if her father had but spit in her face, would she not have shame? Would she not hide in shame for 7 days? Let her be shut up outside the camp for 7 days. Okay, that's Numbers 12:14. But if one was reprimanded by her father, would hide in shame for 7 days, one could infer through an a fortiori inference that one reprimanded by the divine presence should be shut up outside the camp for 14 days. I said a little bit different. If she was demanded, right, Shechina, which is more than just a father, which I don't know it's that clear anyway, but is the Shechina more than the father? No. Or maybe they mean the human father. Rather, one must say it is sufficient for the conclusion that emerges from an a fortiori inference to be like its source. This is foundational. I think it's worth it to paste this here. It shows up a lot throughout Shas. Dayo lavo min adin lihiyot kenidon 69b. Zevachim 69b. Dayo lavo min adin lihiyot kenidon is Gematria 793. And Atbash is 1657. Hebrew Mirrors is 316. Okay. All right, let's continue. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Meir Karash Kadash. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Avid, said, Rabbi Meir does require that a Kal V'chomer inference conforms to this principle, but he does not actually infer his opinion through Kal V'chomer. Rather, he found a verse and interpreted it. Zois toiras habehema v'ha'oiv. V'chiyeh ze toiras shavos v'hema la'oiv, oif la'behema. V'hema tamem magamaso, oif eina metamem magamaso. Oif metamem godim abeis hablio. V'hema eina metamem begodim abeis hablio. The Torah states, with regard to the impurity of unslaughtered animal carcasses, This is the law of the beast and of the fowl, Leviticus 11:46, indicating that the two are somehow equated, but with regard to what law is a beast equal to a fowl and a fowl equal to a beast. The halachot of ritual impurity governing animals and birds are not comparable. An animal transmits impurity by touching and carrying, whereas a bird does not transmit impurity by touching or by carrying. Furthermore, a bird renders the garments of one who swallows it ritually impure when it is in the throat. An animal does not render the garments of one who swallows it ritually impure when it is in the throat. Ela loy melach ma behema dove shemachshir achil metal treifos mitumaso avoif dove shemachshir achil metal treifos mitumaso. Rather, this verse serves to tell you that just as with regard to an animal, that which renders it fit for consumption, meaning slaughter purifies it, even when it is a treifa from its impurity, so too with regard to a bird, that which renders it fit for consumption, meaning both the slaughter of an unsacred bird and pinching of the nape of a bird offering purifies a bird, even if it is a treifa from its impurity. Rabbi Yehuda, my time. Rabbi Yehuda, my time. Rabbi Yehuda, my time. Die. Rabbi Yehuda, my time. Kalash, Kalash, Nevada, Telefon. Rabbi Yehuda, Trela, Nemro. Im Trefa Chaya, Hare, Nevada, Moa. Im Trefa Elachaya, Hi, Bichlal, Nebiho. Elohavi Trefa, Shechata, Shem Tam. The Gemara asks, and what is the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that a bird that is a treifa imparts impurity even when slaughtered? He too found a verse and interpreted it. The Torah states with regard to the ritual impurity of a kosher bird carcasses, and every soul that eats a carcass or a treifa, he shall be impure until the evening. Leviticus 17:15. Rabbi Yehuda said, why was the case of a treifa stated? If the verse is referring to a live treifa, it should not be impure, as the term a carcass is stated, indicating that to impart impurity the bird must be dead. If it is referring to a treifa that is not alive, but rather it has died of its wounds, it falls within the category of a carcass. Rather, the word treifa is written to include a treifa that one slaughtered before it had the opportunity to die by itself, to teach that it imparts ritual impurity as would a carcass. Rav Shezvi said to the sage who suggested the source for Yehuda's opinion, if that is so, one should interpret another verse likewise, as is written, and the fat of a carcass and the fat of a treifa may be used for any other service, Leviticus 7:24, meaning that although the meat of a carcass imparts ritual impurity, those fats that would be forbidden, even if the animal had been slaughtered, do not impart impurity. Hasamnami. Nema, im treifa chaya hare nevela amua, im treifa eno chaya hare hi bichlal nevela. El lahavi treifa sheshachta shechel ba tahor miklal hi mitama'a. There too, let us say, interpreting the verse according to Rabbi Yehuda's logic, why is the case of a treifa stated? It is referring to a live treifa. The case is superfluous, as a carcass is stated. Since the forbidden fat of a carcass is pure, obviously that of a live animal is pure. If it is referring to a treifa that is not alive, but has rather died of its wounds, it is included within the category of a carcass, and likewise it need not be mentioned. Rather, the word treifa is written to include a treifa that one slaughtered, to teach that its forbidden fat is pure. By inference, one should then conclude that its meat does impart impurity. והאמר יהודה ואמרי לה במסניסה תנא וכי המסבינה בהמה מקצת בהמה מטמא מקצת בהמה אין מטמא ואיזה זו שריפה ששחטה. But doesn't Rabbi Yehuda say that Rav says, and some say that it was taught in Braita, the verse concerning the impurity of carcasses states, and if some animal of which you may eat dies, one who touches its carcass shall be impure. Leviticus 11:39. The word some teaches that some animals impart impurity and some animals do not impart impurity. And what is it that does not impart impurity? That is a treifa that one slaughtered. And even its meat does not impart impurity. The word treifa is not needed to teach that its forbidden fat is pure. Ela treifa miboya l'mote tame'a mi sheyesh b'mina treifa yatzasa zo she'ein b'mina treifa. Rather, the word treifa in the verse concerning forbidden fat, Leviticus 7:24, is necessary to exclude non-kosher animals from the halacha in the verse and to teach that their forbidden fat is impure. The word indicates that only the forbidden fat of those carcasses whose species of the halacha of treifa applies, meaning those of kosher animals, impart impurity. Forbidden fat of a carcass of a non-kosher bird, non-kosher animal is excluded, as the halacha of treifa does not apply to its species. The status of treifa is immaterial for a non-kosher animal, as its consumption is prohibited in any event. Achanami limute of tame she'ein b'mina treifa. Here too, the word treifa in the verse concerning the impurity of kosher bird carcasses, Leviticus 17:15, should be interpreted as excluding a carcass of a non-kosher bird from ritual impurity, as the halacha of treifa does not apply to its species. Therefore, this verse cannot serve as a source for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion with regard to the impurity of a slaughtered bird that is a treifa of metame. Rabbi Yehuda nevela nafkale. The Gemara responds, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha that the carcass of a non-kosher bird does not impart impurity is derived from the phrase of a carcass as it appears elsewhere. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer yachol tehei nivlas oif mitame mituma begadim abeis abliya tamalomer nevela treifa lo yochal mi she'isuho mishum bal toichal nevelo yatzazeh she'ein asuroi mishum bal toichal nevela el mishum bal toichal tome. As it is taught in Braita that Rabbi Yehuda says, one might have thought that a carcass of a non-kosher bird renders the garments of one who swallows it ritually impure when it is in the throat, but the verse states, concerning the impurity of carcasses of birds, a carcass or a treifa he shall not eat. Leviticus 22, verse 8. This type of impurity applies only to those birds that are forbidden, specifically due to the prohibition, you shall not eat of a carcass, meaning kosher birds that die without ritual slaughter. This carcass of a non-kosher animal is excluded, and it is not impure, as it is forbidden not due to the prohibition, you shall not eat of a carcass, but rather due to the prohibition, you shall not eat a non-kosher bird, to render yourself impure with it. Consequently, the word treifa in the aforementioned verse, Leviticus 17:15, teaches that a slaughtered treifa imparts ritual impurity as originally posited.